Alright, hello guys, and welcome to our super exciting February 2020 forecast. Now, before I get started with this video though, I would ask that you do subscribe if you do like weather-related content, and also make sure to share this video with your friends and family on social media. Let's get right into things. Alright, so we're going to be talking about our precipitation forecast first off, and then getting into our temperature forecast, and then finally our overall forecast. But first off, our precipitation forecast. We are expecting some slightly drier than normal conditions there for coastal Oregon, and then most of the northern portions of California there as well. Now, in this first layer, it won't be too noticeable. This is typically the area where we say you might not really feel it, but it definitely will be on paper below average precipitation over the course of the entire month of February there. And I really expect the storm track to go to your north, potentially bringing some precipitation there from Washington in through the northern Rockies especially. Now, we even have a second layer of brown here for Northern California, especially there along the coast, and that's going to be an area where it's going to be a bit more noticeable, and we're going to have less precipitation than those surrounding tan regions. This is an area where we specifically see we should be dealing with some pretty dry conditions over the month of February, and we've seen precipitation over the winter in this region, a lot of it at times, but really February, I think things are going to calm down. Again, most of that precipitation specifically going up to your north through Washington in the northern Rockies, as well as I expect that to be where the jet stream takes those storms throughout the month here. Now, we're about to start talking about where we could see some more dry than normal conditions there in the United States, as well as where we could see some above average precipitation as we head forward in through February. Now, that second area of drier than normal conditions here is going to be from northern Oklahoma through Kansas, Missouri, portions of Nebraska, portions of Iowa, up through Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio here. This is an area, again, in that first shade, maybe not too noticeable. Some areas more than others, but might be a lot closer to average than people might think. Really going to just be dealing with a lack of a major storm track coming through here, and that's definitely a different story than January. If you remember earlier in January, we definitely were dealing with a very frequent storm track through this area, and it's really lightened up over the last little bit of January for sure. If you live in these regions, you've probably noticed that, but yeah, definitely lightened up quite a bit there. Now, before we move on to our above average precipitation, I have a question of the video. I decided to add this. Who do you think is going to win the Super Bowl? We have the Super Bowl coming up, and I thought that'd be a fun thing to do in the comment section below. Make a bold prediction about the Super Bowl. Who you think is going to win, and some statistics maybe. And whoever has the closest, like freakishly close to being accurate predictions for the Super Bowl, I'm going to feature you in our Monday's video. Whatever video comes out on Monday, I'll feature you and your comment in that video. So go ahead and make your predictions. I think the 49ers are going to win. I think they have the most balanced team, but I am very curious to see what a lot of you think is going to happen. All right, now we're about to move on to our above average precipitation here, which is going to be very exciting to take a look at as it looks to take a potential nor'easter track from the Gulf up through the East Coast. All right, so looking at our storm track here, or our above average precipitation, better yet, it looks pretty obvious where our storm track goes. It goes from kind of Texas up into the Gulf states and then up into the mid-Atlantic. That's where we're specifically looking at above average precipitation here. This is our lightest shade of above average precipitation. So again, confidence is a little bit lower for this area. We definitely see a couple of systems that are at least going to bring rain to these areas over the next week or so, which is going to get us into our first week of February. So we know we're going to get off to a hot start with this precipitation forecast. It's what happens beyond that becomes really interesting. Obviously, we want to see this continue for this to verify for the most part, but it does look like we will be in a very favorable pattern for nor'easters, which could potentially translate into snowstorms if we get that cold air to combine with the storm track, and that's really a big question mark for sure. Now, we definitely have a second shade of green here for Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and coastal North Carolina there, and that's just where we're going to be seeing even more precipitation from these systems. These are the areas that will, no matter where the nor'easter goes, it definitely tracks over Florida and over these regions. So this is going to be an area that I think will have the most above average precipitation out of any of the regions here in the southeastern United States. as we see those systems track up through this region. We've seen this over the past month as well, so you guys know what you're in for here. That looks to continue through February, if not enhance and become even more frequent with these storms moving through the area. And this could even add to some severe weather within these regions as we get a little bit warmer towards the end of February, only a little bit. We are going to be seeing over the next 2 or 3 days some severe weather for southern Florida, so be on the lookout for that. Miami, areas like that. So this is going to get off to a very early start with the potential severe weather within these regions. All right, now we're about to get into your super exciting temperature forecast where things are going to get very, very interesting. It's going to be a very different look than what January had, and I hope a lot of you are excited for that. Now, to get things started, we're going to be talking about our above average temperature regions here. And I know a lot of you are not excited for this, particularly in the deep south. I know you guys have been waiting and waiting and waiting for the cold weather, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but all I can do is give you guys the most accurate forecast and show you guys what I think is going to happen. So I apologize in advance. The four corner states, Nevada and California, you guys have been dealing with off and on cold and warmth, so it's not as bad news for you guys. You guys are probably feeling pretty good, but Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, you guys are probably pretty much over the warmth by this point. The good news is it's only our first shade, which means it probably won't be too noticeable, and it will feel a lot closer to average, and it might even be a lot closer to average. But on paper, we will be dealing with some above average temperatures throughout these regions. Now, we do have a second shade of orange, and that's for Southern California, the southern half of Arizona, New Mexico, and a little bit of Texas there as well. And these are areas where it will be a bit more noticeable that we will have some above normal temperatures. And this is very, very close to what we had in February of 2014, which is my top analog month for this month. Now let's start talking about that below average temperature region, and you can pretty much probably pick out where it's going to be based on where the warmth is, and that's for the northern United States. So as you can see here, our light blue region, this is our first shade of below average temperatures. Again, might not be too noticeable, but it's going to be pretty close to average, and on paper you will be below average temperatures. So from Washington, northern Idaho, northern Montana, and then specifically through the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan. That's the areas that I expect to be the coldest. And then we even see New England as well getting in on some of those slightly below average temperature regions there. Now you might be wondering, there's a lot of empty space in between the two different temperatures, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a little bit. Now, before I do that, we do have a second layer of blue here for North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, northern Iowa, and then in through Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. This is an area where I expect to be especially below average, and it will be quite noticeable in this area that it is pretty cold for this time of year. Now, that area in between here is our equal chances or EC region, and really what this means is it could go either way, it could swing either way, and the reason I have this is because the models are in huge disagreement about what's going to happen long range and long term, and really what we're looking at is the potential for a cool down around the halfway mark of February for these middle portions of the eastern United States, but we've seen that in the months past, and then it never really happened. So what I'm calling for is an equal chance, and it could happen, it could not, and based on history, it might not. But technically, the models are calling for that to happen. So there's about a 50-50 shot that we see warmer than normal conditions or colder than normal conditions for those regions. And I hope that answers any questions that you guys would have about that. Now we're about to get into our super exciting overall forecast, which is going to tell the whole story about what conditions you could be expecting for your region. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about it region by region here. I'm going to work from west to east, and that's typically what I do here. This is a very exciting map, and I love making these because I'm able to kind of just tell you guys my opinion on the actual conditions, and I get a little less scientific with it, you know, like cold possible late. That's not really something you see typically, so I'll be talking about all of these regions for you guys. Starting out with our brown region here from Oregon down through California and in through Nevada, that's our more dry region. You saw on our precipitation forecast we're expecting less precipitation for these regions, and that's the reason why I gave you guys the more dry than normal region there. To your north for Washington and the Northern Rockies, again, could be stormy at times. We could see that continued storminess. I mentioned that in the precipitation forecast as well. That could be in the form of snow for higher elevation and the form of rain for more of the valley regions or coastal regions there. To your south in that orange region for the four corner states, we see warmer than normal conditions. You saw that on our temperature forecast. It's quite obvious why I have that. We do have a gray region there for portions like Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma. That's an area where I expect it to be pretty close to average conditions. I don't really have any category for those regions worth mentioning. And then to your north, we have a purple region here, and that's our colder than normal region, and this is where the coldest air is expected to be throughout the month of February. To your south, we have a lighter blue region, and this is where cold is possible late. Again, I mentioned that the models are trending at the possibility for a cool down at some point during the month, but also we've seen that in the months past, and it didn't really come true. So that's why I'm saying cold possible late, because well, we've seen these chances fizzle out in past months, and it's really important to go based off of recent history and kind of just learn from what's happening. And that's what history would tell me, is that there's a good chance that chance fizzles out at some point. But to our south, we have frequent storms for this region. This is where we're expecting some nor'easters to develop, and this can bring thunderstorms or just very heavy rain. But either way, it's going to be frequently very stormy for a lot of these regions in the deep south. They're within the cold possible late region there for the mid-Atlantic states, and then up through coastal New England, we have snowstorms possible, and that probably mostly relies on that cold possible late also happening. So this is also one that could fizzle out for sure. But we definitely have snowstorms possible, and we've been seeing the chances on the models. The models are flirting with the chance for some snowstorms for this region. So I'm definitely thinking it's possible, not likely necessarily, but definitely possible that we do see some snowstorms within the month of February for these regions. Obviously, the further north you are in there, the higher the chance. And then we have, last but not least, our white region up there for the interior New England and northeastern United States. And that's where most of the snow in the eastern United States is going to occur. And that's not very surprising. Very similar to last winter, how we had a lot of snowstorms coming through there. The models have been hinting at a very frequent storm track through that region that could bring actually a very significant amount of snow over the course of multiple storms there. So I'm eyeballing that chance as well. Anyway, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this February forecast. Again, be sure to share it with your friends and family, and I'll see you guys in the next video.